Andrew, our little sports media business, it's now hundreds of millions of dollars reported about Tom Brady, Phil Mickelson with the LIV Golf Tour. The money keeps going up, up, and up.
Yeah, Arlo White goes from NBC to LIV, huge raise. It's all about one thing, of course, John. And we're back. The Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast presented by USA Track and Field. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. And today, John, a lot to talk about. Our big get coming up later is CJ McCollum, the outstanding guard from the New Orleans Pelicans, who's now a part of ESPN, doing their studio stuff, going to develop a podcast with them. Very interesting interview that we have for you in a little bit.
All right, but let's get started like we always get started. Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
This has been a power chair politics movement in the NFL. Big names like Tom Brady and Troy Aikman. But I'm telling you, under the radar, I think Amazon might have found something in Ryan Fitzpatrick. Deal is about to get done, I believe. Fitzpatrick will be part of that pregame and postgame show on Thursday Night Football. Amazon has the exclusive rights to Thursday Night Football beginning this fall. And I think Fitzpatrick could be really good, not only because what we've seen, but I've talked to a lot of people who have meetings with quarterbacks, each week, producers, broadcasters, and Fitzpatrick shines in those. Like, we know he's smart. He's going to obviously have the street cred in terms of intelligence because he graduated from Harvard. But what, for me, it's the social IQ. I just have noticed over the years he was on 10 teams, I think, in 17 years, but always liked by his teammates. And I think when you talk about an ensemble and you're part of a group and you want to make it fun, that likability factor does shine through. And I just think Fitzpatrick, he made a lot of money, about $80 million as a player. So how much does he want to do this and for how long and how big a role? Has a bunch of kids as well. So he won't have to work weekends with Amazon. I think he could be someone who could shine. And so all of this movement we've had this year, in this offseason, this crazy NFL TV free agency, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick could be a little bit under the radar. That could be a big move by Amazon.
Power chair politics. I like that phrase, Andrew. That's good. My who's up, I'm going to go into the executive ranks again. Amy Rosenfeld. She's a producer who was with ESPN and is leaving ESPN to go to NBC, where she's going to oversee Olympic production and report right into Molly Solomon. She's coming in having missed the Olympics in China and in Japan. She's going to first two Olympics are going to be in Paris and in LA, 2024, 2028, the Summer Olympics. Usually, Andrew, when somebody leaves ESPN, you hear some sniping about the person from coming out of Bristol. You heard none of that about Amy. She's very well liked. She's very well regarded. Right now, Stephanie Druley has an interim plan up where there are 4 people that are stepping in to take over Amy's responsibilities. It went a little bit under the radar, but that's going to be a big loss for ESPN.
John, when I left ESPN, did they snipe about me?
Oh, they still snipe about you. I hear it all the time.
Now.
They
didn't snipe then, I don't think, but maybe now they do.
I had a phone call just last week where somebody who shall go nameless said, hey, you are still responsible for what Marchand says on your podcast, right? I'm like, no, I'm not. Come on.
You're responsible. All
You're getting me in trouble.
All complaints go to John Ourand. Let's get another one. Who's down for you?
All right, who's down? I got to give it to Mark Jones. It is hard to replace a Hall of Famer in Mike Breen. And boy, did the NBA Finals miss his big game voice. They missed his bangs that went out there. But, Mark Jones, in game 1, Boston had this fourth quarter that was historic. It was an amazing comeback where they blew a game wide open. He had this call in the middle of it.
The Celtics have stormed ahead. This insurrection has them leading by 11.
Andrew, I'm like, it stopped me. I was watching. I heard him call this comeback an insurrection. That is a very loaded term nowadays. And it stopped me as a viewer. I was like, did I just hear that correctly? It was just kind of like a bizarre call in the middle of an historic run. He didn't seem up for it necessarily. I felt bad for him because Jeff Van Gundy also was gone too, and those Breen, Van Gundy, and Mark Jackson have such a good chemistry going there. But I have Mark Jones as my who's down following his first 2 games of the NBA Finals.
All right, I'm going to go who's down. Let's stick with the NBA. Mike Bass.
Bass.
Yes, NBA PR head honcho. Look, the NBA goes nuts about these ratings. That the first 2 games around 12 million, which I guess isn't is not a great number. You have to go back to like 2000, maybe 7. So way pre-pandemic to get that low. But I think the NBA, they need to chill. Like, they're pretty aggressive behind the scenes about these ratings and how we should look at them and whatever. They are what they are. But here's the thing, and this is why they should relax a little bit. The NBA is going to do just fine. All the ratings for the NBA, for the leagues, is all about the next TV deal. And I can't imagine that they're not going to have a killing. All right, that's number one. Between ESPN and Warner Brothers Discovery wanting it to return, between Apple and Amazon possibly getting involved. I could see Fox, I could see CBS, maybe NBC. I could see all these places all want a piece of the NBA. So they're going to do great. And I also think this series could go 6-7 games. And if it does, I think the ratings will be there. So they got to chill a little bit. Bass, just chill out a little bit, relax, and just they don't have to be so aggressive and trying to like make people think something that's not true, because then when it is true, it's harder to be like, well, now I believe it because we have all these excuses before, now whatever it is. And the ratings, they're fine. They're not great. They haven't been great, but I also think basketball, baseball, hockey to a degree, they make a mistake of comparing themselves to because the Super Bowl, because the NFL does so well on a weekly basis. If I were all these leagues, I would say this is how many people watch in terms of minutes overall for the season of our sport compared to football. And then people would be like, well, you play 82 games, football plays 17. Exactly. It's supply and demand. Football has a great TV sport. They're the most dominant sport, no doubt about it. The Super Bowl is appointment viewing. The one mistake I do think these leagues, the NBA makes, and I think the and baseball make, is not planting enough seeds. The NFL plants a seed with 100 million people every year, especially young people, that kind of keeps that growing. And basketball, these games start so late on the East Coast, it's hard to, there's kids who never watch the end of a game basically, and then you want them to be viewers when their teams aren't involved. It's kind of, I don't think that works.
Quick question. When you say plant the seeds, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is that you watch, as a kid, you watch the Super Bowl every year. It starts at a little after 6 o'clock. So it's just part of like who you are. And you have all these memories of the Super Bowl as a kid. And I think basketball and baseball, because there's not even one game that starts at a really reasonable hour. There's no like the Final Four. The first game of the Final Four is around 5:30. I mean, I think if on the NBA, yes, you would take a little bit of a hit in terms of ratings, but I would want young kids to watch the whole game live so you kind of build that repetition. I think these leagues that have so much tonnage in the regular season and have a series instead of one game as their championship, they're not planting those seeds. And I do think we're kind of seeing that now. Now we're decades into that kind of philosophy in terms of the game times. And I don't think they do a good job of that in terms of the games. And also, I just think the sport is very easy to digest on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter with highlights that before, which I've talked about before, you would have missed because you had to watch the game live. And now it's just 2 seconds later on your phone, you can see the great play by Steph Curry or whomever. And so it's not as imperative to be in front of your TV for the whole 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't know if I hear the complaint about start times all the time, 9 o'clock start times for the NBA Finals. They had 9 o'clock start times all the way through Jordan's run. That 9 o'clock on the East Coast is 6 o'clock on the West Coast. The ratings are there. The kids are watching them. Maybe not like everybody's kid, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But I do know, 6:30 on a Sunday is when the Super Bowl starts, and you know that just automatically.
We have NBA on the rundown. Let's revisit this a little bit at the end of the rundown before we get to McCollum. But let's go right into the topics. LIV golf has been a huge issue.
Can I stop you for that? LIV golf is our number one topic. Who came up with this rundown, Andrew?
Well, we did. But when you talk to all those people, you tell them it was me. I think LIV Golf's a huge story. First off,
I do too. By the way, I do
broadcasting
too.
wise, Arlo White goes from NBC to be the lead voice for LIV Golf. Respected, very good announcer. I don't know the exact numbers, but he was making hundreds of thousands for NBC. He's making millions now. I do know that, and it's a long-term contract, 8 to 10 events. He'll still be able to do soccer. He does some games for the Chicago Fire. MLS, if they have a deal with Apple, I do think there could be some movement with broadcasters. Maybe Arlo White's involved in that. We'll have to see. But that's number one. Obviously, on the course, Mickelson and Dustin Johnson joining the tour. It's a very complicated issue. What's your take overall when you look at it from a media perspective?
Well, the Chicago Fire came out with a statement saying they were going to keep Arlo White. Look, I'm going to be looking to see if there's going to be any blowback to the Chicago Fire for keeping somebody that operates with LIV Golf. LIV is toxic right now to a lot of sponsors that are pulling their sponsorships. All of the U.S. media companies are refusing to deal with LIV. I mean, they have no U.S. media deal. You're going to have to watch the first tournament on YouTube or Facebook. And so, is there going to be a blowback to somebody like Arlo White, who is going to be announcing for LIV Golf? I mean, is that possibly going to affect him? I mean, I don't think so, but I can see plenty of scenarios where it's going to come back and bite him.
Yes, but the thing is, so now we get into, now this is a sports media podcast, so and you start getting into geopolitical talk. We don't want to go too far outside of like what our specialty is. I do think though, you look at the Premier League, Newcastle is owned by Saudi Arabian same group, and NBC still has the Premier League on, right? There's nobody boycotting the Premier League because of that. And this has been a big issue and talked about a lot in Europe. You look at the NBA, we talked about earlier, and we can talk about China and what's gone on there. In terms of there's a relationship there. All the sports leagues, or a lot of companies do. It's not just the NBA. It's not fair to signal them out. So I guess the point is, this is a little bit of whataboutism, obviously. Look, I think I know where I would stand in terms of if I had this was in front of me, but until you actually have that kind of money, it's hard to say. You would definitely turn it down in front of you. But I also can see how someone like Arlo White can be like, well, I don't have anything to do with this. I'm just changing my family's financial position for decades. And this is a chance to do it. Now, I'm not saying I would do it, but I could understand where Arlo White's coming from.
Many of the stories that you're reading, there's good versus evil here. There's a PGA Tour versus LIV Golf. Your colleague, Ian O'Connor, I thought had an excellent column. People should click on it. It's like the PGA Tour is all about money too. It's, all these players are making money decisions. If you listen to a lot of the reasons that they give, it's like, oh, it's for me and my family, and they try to stay away from the geopolitical, but it keeps coming in this instance. And I just don't know how far it's going to go. I'm curious to see what the attendance is going to be like at the first event. I'm curious to see what sort of metrics they have on video for the first event. How many people are going to be watching it? Let's
finish off with this because we're going to move into some TV deals. They're going to be on YouTube, Facebook, any place else?
And I think the LIV Golf website, a couple of different websites. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think John Ourand looks a year down the road? Do they have a TV deal at some point?
I don't see them having a US TV deal anytime in the next several years.
But let's just say you have Phil Mickelson going, Dustin Johnson. I saw someone else who's Ricky Fowler, I think that's who it was, who they think is going to come pretty soon. You start just getting, they start seeing these paydays. It becomes a little bit more accepted. People kind of forget they like the tour, whatever it goes on. They start getting a couple more players. Then do you change your mind and someone says, you know what, we can do it?
It depends on if a network is willing to defy the PGA Tour. All the networks, ESPN, CBS, NBC, they're at the beginning of very long-term relationships with the PGA Tour. They're not even taking the meetings. Fox, when it had the U.S. Open, and it had Greg Norman on the U.S. Open, like that's not a good relationship. Talk about a toxic relationship. When Greg Norman left Fox, they do not get along. They are not talking with the LIV Golf Tour. Warner Brothers Discovery, they have deals around the world with the PGA Tour. It's going to take a lot for these media companies to speculate. So if in 3 years, 4 years, it's an established tour with some of the top name players, with several of the top name players, maybe it'll be less of a risk. But for the foreseeable future, I just don't see it happening in the U.S. Do you?
I'm not sure. I think, though, the more kind of establishes itself, I could see somebody, maybe it's a lesser network, right? We're kind of talking about the big ones, but maybe there's a lesser network out there that says, you know what, let me take a crack at this, right? There's a lot of networks out there. So maybe it's not one of the big ones that we always talk about, right? The ESPNs, the Foxes, the NBC, the CBSs, the Turners. Maybe it's not one of those, but maybe somebody else says, you know what, let's put this on. I think that just the money they're throwing around, they don't seem like they're backing down, right? These are long-term commitments.
They're not going away. Yeah.
Like I know the Arlo White term is a long-term one. I don't know the number of years, but I know it's a long-term one. So I imagine the players is also long-term. So I don't think they're going anywhere. So I think
let's go through a couple of those networks. And I guess there's beIN Sport, which they're not going to grow on beIN Sport. They could go a streaming route. They could go to Zone. Potentially, I suppose they could go to Apple TV.
Yep.
All the other
they're not going to get a big fee though. Like I would just go YouTube and Facebook. I would go for broad distribution anyways. It's not like Apple or anybody's going to give them a big number, right? So I think you want broadest distribution. And even like these networks aren't going to give you, I don't think, a big number. You're just starting out, right? But I just think that there's a chance it could become successful. I think that it's had a really rough start. But I do think, and will fans, I don't know, like if you're in Portland and there's an event there, are you going to go and see these guys play? Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, or are you going to say, I can't support this? I just think when you drill down a little bit, you can't like support anything. Honestly, almost like when you look at all these companies, not all of them. I mean, there's different levels. So of course, but it will definitely be interesting. All right, let's move to our next topic and talk about some deals. You had a story the other day. We talked about Big Ten Network last week. Some little interesting findings in terms of where things stand exactly with a couple of the dark horses that we mentioned last week for the Big Ten deal.
This is a big week for the Big Ten. They're taking meetings with most of the big players that want their rights: ESPN, CBS, NBC. Amazon has come in with a very big offer, I'm told, though nothing has been formalized yet. What's interesting, though, this Warner Brothers Discovery, those talks they just haven't progressed from a couple of weeks ago. Apple, they were in there big early. They're still talking, but those talks haven't progressed. So if I'm going to handicap where everybody is right now, Apple and Warner Brothers Discovery, which of course operate Turner and the Turner channels, TBS and TNT, to call them dark horses might be a little bit much. I mean, they are very far behind the pace. NBC, CBS, ESPN, and Amazon, they're the most aggressive ones right now. The question is, how many packages are they going to create? Fox already has the biggest package. We don't know what it is yet until they create these other packages. How many other packages will they have? How much money will they get? And from what I'm told, the Big Ten Conference is going to be the first college conference to earn more than $1 billion per year in media rights.
Wow, that's crazy. That makes NIL kind of seem like there should be the players should need to get paid a little bit. If we're bringing $1 billion a year, yeah, that is interesting. I've heard Amazon strongly for a while that they're probably going to get in there. And it makes sense. Again, our old debate. NFL. So, John, this is Amazon. You're like, you don't like their NFL, Yankees, soccer, cricket around the world, Big Ten.
We'll see if they get the Big Ten. They're going after the Big Ten hard, I'm told.
And also, it's interesting to me about Apple is that I told you last week, I'm not saying they're not getting Sunday ticket, right? I'm not reporting that. I'm not saying that, but I have heard some rumblings that maybe they're not kind of that favorite that we at one point thought they were, because we both don't really like saying who's the favorite, but I've heard that. And if they don't get Big Ten, they don't get Sunday ticket, and they have baseball, maybe soccer, MLS, that doesn't really think like you're really getting into sports if you're Apple, at least at this point.
Yeah, again, we're talking about the horse race right now, and Apple was ahead in the horse race for Sunday Ticket. Now it looks like they're a little bit behind Amazon, if not tied with Amazon, but it is a two-horse race. I think ESPN, which was in there earlier, they've fallen way back. So unless the money comes way back, which I don't expect it to, it's going to be either Apple or Amazon.
No, Discovery, Warner Brothers?
I have not heard them as being particularly active yet.
Okay. All right, fine. I'll keep them just as a dark horse. I'm not saying it's going to be them, but I'll keep them as a dark horse, even though I really don't know. Okay. So that's good. That's like Chris Russo. He always would do this, like, I don't know about this, like the NHL. And then he'd have like a huge opinion.
Yeah, and then I'm going to come up and say, Discovery didn't get it. I told you I didn't know if they'd get it.
But he would do, I don't know. And then, I don't really know much about hockey, and then give you a huge opinion. It's like you just told us 2 seconds ago. You literally just said a sentence ago, I don't know about this subject.
Andrew, you brought up New York Sports Radio. Everybody has to drink. It's a new drinking game of the Mando podcast here.
It's fun to mention it. There's a big story actually this week. John Sterling, voice of the Yankees, is not going to do 25 to 30 games in the second half of the season, which is a big story. He's going to be 84 in July. He's kind of a medical marvel. His voice still sounds good, but the travel is a lot. So he's going to cut down his games, but he'll do the rest of the he'll do about 3 trips, and then he'll do the playoff games. But that's a big story. So anyways, drink again. All right.
Another one, yet another one.
How about they to drink every time we talk NFL TV free agency?
or if we go back and forth about Amazon and Apple, that'd be great.
Exactly. They'd be pretty drunk. All right.
We talked about the story I did on the Big Ten. You had a good story about Amazon and their NFL studio show. What do you got?
Couple of things. So number one, we mentioned Fitzpatrick at the top. That looks like it's going to happen. He'll be in studio. Other people, they've already announced Tony Gonzalez, Marshawn Lynch, Richard Sherman, also very likely to be involved. And you look at the move. Like I said, I liked Fitzpatrick. The other item was in my newsletter on Mondays, my paid newsletter. Kay Adams, that does not look like it's going to happen between her and Amazon. She was looking at that. There was a thought that was going to happen. I think the financials were very not close at all, what she was looking for and what they were offering. And so I'm not going to say because things reverse, but I mean, I've been told it's not happening, but like things reverse. So I'm not going to fully report that. I don't like reporting something's not going to happen. You just look bad if that happens. But I think that one's on the unlikely at this point. And then in terms of their games, there's been talk about Manning cast. Ryan Glasspiegel, my colleague from the Post, reported maybe in June that they talked with Pat McAfee. And I still think McAfee could be involved. But in terms of like a Manning cast type thing, they'll have alternative feeds. But in terms of the big ones, I think they're only going to do 3 or 4 during the year. Maybe McAfee's involved in one of those. Or maybe like he does his show from Thursday night. There's, I think there's a couple of machinations that could happen. But so I think those are some interesting elements of what Amazon's going to do. And the thing is, when you think about it, you pay Al Michaels and Herbstreit a combined over $20 million, probably way over 20 million. You probably want the focus to be on them. You know what I mean? And you don't know if you necessarily want like a lot of alternative broadcasts.
Well, I'm interested just in the fact that they're putting so much effort into a traditional linear TV-esque type of studio show where they're trying to, they want a pregame show. They obviously want a halftime show and they want a postgame show. When my view of streaming is it's not like broadcast television where people come in early and, we'll sit through the last 15 minutes or the last half hour of a pregame show to get to the game. You're going to get in there for the game. That's what you're there to see. So I'm just curious to see where this strategy leads and what the uptake, what the viewership's going to be like, for that studio show.
Yeah, I think the pregame won't do that well. I do think you could have some magic at halftime. And then I think the postgame is where you maybe could keep some people around if you make it interesting and you go to it right away. So that's where I think the bread's buttered. And I think any of these, even on, linear television, to establish a new pregame show is difficult. I mean, you could try the ESPN strategy and have magic on twice during the year to try to get sorry. I couldn't. That was just to be hilarious.
You couldn't resist. You just couldn't resist.
They announced Magic and he's on twice during the year. So he did come for one game of the finals. But it's hard.
It led to such a crowded desk. Did you see they were all
it was a lot of
shoulder
people
to shoulder on the desk there?
It was unneeded. They should have just let it go. But they did have Magic in the announcement. So the pregame shows, I do think, and then like the halftime show for the NBA Finals is like, we saw this last year because everyone focused on it after the Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor stuff. But it's like all commercials. Back to Amazon. Look, I think they're going to be younger. These guys are all just off the field for the most part. Gonzalez has been off for a while now, but the rest of them are just off the field. And so you compare that to what Fox does, much older, CBS, much older. So that will be a contrast. ESPN, a little bit more middle-aged, but compared to, the older Fox and CBS, we both know the NFL has a heavy hand, right? Our guy, Brian Rolapp, listening right now to the pod.
Hey, Brian.
In the NFL, they like things done a certain way. And so like if it gets 5 viewers, they're still going to have to do this every year, right? Even if it's not successful, there's an expectation of what you do if you have a big NFL package or any NFL package really. And part of it is doing that ancillary programming that leads into your games.
Yeah. That's another point though, about everybody expects the Amazon production to be younger, to bring in younger viewers. Cause of course the cord cutters are the ones that are most attracted to it. I'm not totally convinced that's going to be the case. I'm dying to see what the breakdown is going to be. Cause it is like, you get it through your television, you watch it sort of like in a very old school way. I'm not overly convinced that it's going to be discernibly younger than the traditional.
I don't buy that either. I think you get football fans who want to watch it. You have to find it. So the thing is about it's like the Apple argument. Like I have to find the Apple game, right? Like Friday, the Yankees were on Apple. I had to find Apple. Like I knew it was on. I knew to watch it. So the idea that you're going to stumble across this game doesn't really make sense. You have to find the game. So it doesn't necessarily make you younger. Right? Are younger people necessarily on Amazon? I don't think so.
You're going to be hardcore fans. That's the one thing that I'm certain of, because you're going to want to know that you're going to have to know that you're going to Amazon to see this game.
And Amazon, let me say one more thing about Amazon. It is an expensive product, right? Like we're maybe among people who a lot of people everyone has Amazon, right? That's not and they do have big numbers, but that's not necessarily the case. Not everyone just has $139 to make sure they don't have to go to the store and it's free shipping. I mean, most people don't really think like that. So that's an interesting also dynamic in this whole situation.
Next topic, USFL. I have watched a couple of games that Jason Garrett has called. I think this is a beauty of the USFL, is that you find people that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. You want to talk about Tony Romo. He was basically calling the plays as a team was heading down the field. You broke a story this week. He obviously got in front of the NBC executives who gave him a nice little promotion.
Well, he hasn't even got it yet. So he's a leading candidate.
Are we at the 2-yard line again, or are we in the red zone? Where are we?
I'm not sure exactly what yard line. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. He is definitely a top candidate for the Drew Brees position. Brees was doing Notre Dame, and then he was doing the pregame show on Sunday night. I reported earlier that he's not going to do that. And then Brees had his tweet where he said he did admit it is in limbo in his mind. He mentioned a number of things that he might do, including playing pickleball, I think professionally. And so we'll see what ends up being correct there. I think Jason Garrett has a high floor, maybe a lower ceiling. And what I mean by that, I think you kind of know that Jason Garrett's going to have things to say and be pretty good. Like the question is, does he want to get back into coaching? Would that limit what he says? And then analyzing a game. He's very smart, and he's also very media savvy. He has a lot of relationships with the media behind the scenes. And so I think that shows an interest in it. He was in the New York market as a player, backup, and then Dallas market, that Cowboy market's like being in New York in terms of the intensity towards the Cowboys. And so he's very experienced. At the worst, he'll be pretty good, right? Like, do I think he's going to be amazing. I tend to doubt that, but I think he could be pretty good.
I think he's been very steady. We're not reporting this.
Yeah.
But you see the potential of the end of the Manning cast coming sooner than not, huh?
Well, no.
Come on. Let's go there right now.
I said we should no. So John, look at this. So now you get behind the scenes. I said when we're doing the rundown, I said we should mention Peyton Manning because there were reports that he met with I think it's now down to 3, but there are 4 ownership groups trying to get the Broncos. I mean, that's significant. If Peyton Manning obviously goes and runs the Broncos, this has major media implications. You can't do the Manning cast. Can you, you still can own Omaha Productions and you could do some things with them perhaps. But if he were to go run a team, and I'm not saying he is, that doesn't, that's not, the story's not there. It's just something to keep an eye on, it's a little, the side eye looking, to see if, maybe Peyton Manning, could do that. That would have major media implications for ESPN and Peyton Manning. But so I'm not, yes, nobody's reporting that.
Nobody's reporting that at all. But I will say this, and you've said this in previous pods, ESPN is so much less dependent on Manning cast this year than it was last year. I mean, last year it really helped shore up a booth that, wasn't necessarily ready for prime time. They have Troy Aikman and Joe Buck right now. So there's almost less of a need for a Manning cast.
Yeah. When I actually, had like the Buck Aikman store, I did ask somebody important there if, this have something to do with maybe, kind of some paid insurance. Like I was going to give them credit because that made sense. And they said no. So they didn't get credit because they didn't think of that apparently. But to me, it made some sense that, maybe Peyton, he's wanted to maybe have some ownership or run a team. So I thought maybe, that might have been some Peyton insurance, but it could be the case. We'll see. That would be interesting, but we're like that one. We're at our own 2-yard line. All right.
Yeah,
we got 98 yards to go
against the 85 Bears defense. So
I don't know about the 85. I would not say that. I think you're at your own 2-yard line. You have Peyton Manning under center. Great quarterback. No matter what,
no.
when you watch the Manning cast, you think Peyton Manning was like the worst quarterback ever. Like how they make fun about his interception. He's like one of the greats of all time. We gotta act like so. You got Peyton Manning under center.
Going against the Browns of the late 80s. Is that what we're doing here? Do we need a field goal or a touchdown? Lots of questions here, but
I'll say you got Peyton Manning and they got a nickel defense. All right. he might here's up 7 yards there. All right. They're out. Their behinds are off their own goal line. All right. Now they're at the 9 or 10 yard line up. We're dinking another one. All right. Now we're at the 37 all of a sudden. I'm just saying something to watch.
All right. If we're talking about the Mannings, we have to bring up the cover 2. So
cover 2. Oh my. All right, last thing before we get to CJ McCollum, our big get. NBA ratings. I had a little rant at the beginning on my Who's Down with Mike Bass. What do you got? We had Breen. We talked about, you talked about Mark Jones. What do you make of what's gone on? When we're doing this is before game 3 on Wednesday night when we're recording this. So first 2 games kind of is what we're looking at here.
Let me say, I do somewhat understand the angst at ESPN and the angst at the NBA over these ratings. You have, on one hand, an established superstar in Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. I'm not sure if Draymond Green's a superstar, but this is the core group that have been going back to the finals. Many years. They had a 2-year absence, and they're back. My mother knows who Steph Curry is. I always use her as my go-to if somebody crosses over. Then you have the Celtics. Talk about a brand. I mean, the people who tune in to watch the Celtics, regardless of who's on the team. You have offensive basketball going up and down the court. You haven't had very good games yet. I would have expected that the ratings would have been easily as good as they were going into the pandemic, and they're not. I couldn't be more surprised. I said in my newsletter on Monday, this is why I don't gamble, because that would have been as sure a bet as anything that the numbers would have been up.
Well, you did have 2 kind of blowouts. Now I know the first game obviously was an historic comeback, but how many people turned it off before you got the historic comeback? The Golden State was at home up by 12. And you kind of felt like it was over, right? It was like kind of in the background, and then all of a sudden it's like, what? Whoa, let's watch this. So how many people turned off? And then game 2 blowout the other way with Golden State just running away with it. So you haven't gotten good games, so it hasn't been close. I do think I'll remain bullish that if they go 6-7 games, that this number won't be that bad. It'll be pretty good. Also, if I'm the NBA, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Honestly, I think it's going to do great. In terms of the next TV deal.
Yeah, the NBA is going to be fine out of this. If this goes as most people expect, 6 or 7 games, ESPN is going to be fine coming out of this. But the playoffs were the numbers coming out of the playoffs were pretty good. It's been a good season for the NBA, and we'll see where this progresses.
My last point, Mike Breen, this has really helped Mike. Like, not that he needed it. He's almost done the NBA Finals. He's done more than anybody else, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So it's not like he needed more. But this really helped him. Like, missing these 2 games, people missed Bang. I would have gone Russo or Pash as the play-by-player there. You mentioned Jones earlier, but I think Breen had COVID, really wasn't that sick. I do think there's a feeling from people close to him that he could have done the games, but there's protocols that Disney and the NBA have that kept him sidelined.
Andrew, do you feel at all that the absence of Breen contributed to the poor ratings? And only for this reason. Breen wasn't in the booth. Van Gundy wasn't in the booth. And so you had Mark Jones and Mark Jackson calling a game where it felt to me just kind of like a regular season game in February as I tuned in, and I was excited for this game. Do you think that had any effect? You didn't have like that big game voice that we always talk about.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that really impacted. We can get into a bigger debate maybe when we have a slow week about announcers' value. I think over time they have huge value, right? I think if you have the right announcers, it makes it feel better. It makes the game more understandable, especially for people who don't follow it as closely. So yeah, was the quality down without Van Gundy, without Breen? Yes, the quality was down. Do I think the ratings were down because of that? I don't think so. But I will say, when that comeback, I mean, I hit Mark Jones on Twitter and in my newsletter, because in that comeback, he did not raise the level. That was historic. Breen would have been all over that, right? And there's certain announcers who do that. Joe Buck does that. Ian Eagle does that. Al Michaels does that. I think Tirico does that to a degree. And so I think those guys raise the level at a play-by-play level when you're talking about basketball and football. And so and some of those on different sports, of course. And so that's what you missed, but I don't think it had a difference in the ratings. I mean, that's too much. I think that's a lot for most people that kind of think in their head who are just fans of the NBA.
You and I are in perfect agreement on this.
All right, John, let's move to the big get. And this week, a special one, CJ McCollum, guard for the New Orleans Pelicans, now a new ESPN analyst, where he's doing studio work already, making an impact, and he's going to develop a podcast for them as well. He's also still playing, which is somewhat unique. We saw Draymond Green doing that with Turner as well. He's also a Lehigh graduate, class of 2013. And CJ, I have some Lehigh lineage as well. My dad, Herb Marchand, class of 1966. So I've been rooting for you a long time because of that Lehigh connection.
Was Herb on the basketball team, Andrew?
We used to win to 100 sometimes, but you might be looking at me, you might say, that guy looks like he might be a player, but yeah, he was not on the hoop team. But CJ, we enjoyed watching you when you had some runs there, man.
No, I appreciate it, man. I love to hear about Lehigh graduates. I love to hear and see them doing well. And although there's not a lot of us, out there, we seem to travel well, and we seem to be in a lot of different spaces, although there's not a large amount of us.
Yeah, he's told me sometimes they do the average salaries or how much people make in terms of the each year that graduates. And you have an impact on that class of 2013.
You're helping that salary range go up there, CJ.
Yeah, I boosted me, which is great for the organization, great for the school. They can pitch that to the incoming recruits and respective candidates who apply and make us look a little bit better.
Yeah, journalism doesn't usually pay so well in journalism degrees. So good job by you. So, all right, growing up in Ohio. Let's just get going on here. Growing up in Ohio, what did you watch as a kid? Like what shows, what broadcasters, what was CJ McCollum's diet in terms of sports media?
Growing up, I watched a lot of SportsCenter. I watched a lot of ESPN, watching the highlights and the clips over and over and over again. Stuart Scott, may he rest in peace, was one of my favorites. Being able to see how he kind of added that urban flair to the calling, to the reads, and just made sports more enjoyable, more fun for me. And, I think representation matters, and to see someone like him of his caliber, on that stage, it kind of allowed me to see like, hey, if I don't make it in basketball, maybe I can do something in this realm where I'm still around sports, still can talk about sports. So I think that was cool. I watched a lot of PTI, a lot of those shows as a kid, and even still check in now. But I think for the most part, man, I just love sports and I love the NFL. So being able to watch, the countdown and see how the games were called and see some of the greats that have been able to take part in calling games, I think it's just made it more interactive and more fun.
Yeah, because you grew up near Canton, right? That's where
Canton, Hall of Fame football. So I've seen a lot of enshrinements. I've seen a lot of retirement speeches, and some of the best football players that ever played come through there.
All right. So you go to Lehigh. Why Lehigh? Why journalism?
Didn't have a lot of options. Full disclosure, but it felt like the right fit, the right opportunity. Education was a priority for me and my family. We wanted to make sure that, we had something to fall back on. I actually started off in the business school, and a few weeks into econ and the likes of that, I realized I didn't enjoy the process of preparing for those types of tests. I didn't enjoy sitting in a cubicle, and I didn't envision my life, post basketball as a guy who would work on Wall Street. And I felt like it was important for me to switch to something I was more engaged with, something that was a part of my lifestyle. I knew I would be talking for a living in some form or fashion. I knew the interviews would help me if I was a professional athlete. And I knew on the backside that I wanted to be involved in sports, specifically sports journalism. And I ended up switching to journalism. I majored in journalism. I minored in mass communication and sociology. Took a lot of business courses to start, and I was close to a business minor as well. But I think it was just a cool opportunity for me to be a basketball player, but also attend a school where there's a huge emphasis on academia.
CJ, you were at Lehigh for 4 years, so the full 4 years. If NIL were around, or the transfer rules, how do you think that would have affected where you played?
I'm a pretty loyal person at heart, so I don't necessarily think that the transfer rules would have affected me. I kind of enjoyed the path that I took, and I seen the blueprints before me, Steph Curry's of the world. I seen George Hill. Jimmer was in college around the same time. So I was able to see, guys attend small schools, Joe Dumars, McNeese State, and have success at the highest level. So I just knew that if I could continue to work on my game, embrace the situation, embrace what was given to me, what was provided to me, and then also be thankful that I was somebody's first option as opposed to somebody's second or third option. I thought that was important, for my vision of how I view myself. And if I didn't make it, on my own merit going to Lehigh, then it wasn't meant to be. And that's kind of how I approached it. If I were to transfer, hypothetically, there's only like 2 schools that I would even consider transferring to. Like North Carolina, I always loved North Carolina. I like the colors, and obviously Jordan, he was my favorite player. And I would have considered transferring closer to home, but that would have been the only things that would have enticed me to even think about it. In terms of the NIL, I would have made a good amount of money, especially down the stretch based on alumni, the relationships that I now have with hedge fund workers, people that work on Wall Street. I'm sure if there was crypto when I was there, I would have been making a killing in all realms of the NIL. Local car dealership deal, I would have had a car. I would have been, IHOP spokesman probably. We spent a lot of time at local diners and eating pancakes and stuff like that. So, I would have took full advantage of the NIL and everything that it had to offer.
You have such a unique perspective on media now. You grew up, as you said, watching sports centers, watching PTI. You're now in the NBA, where your every move is being reported on. What, seemingly anyway, what is your critique of the current state of NBA media?
I think NBA media is in peak form, if you will, in terms of the coverage, the amount of attention, the detail that they have now. Obviously, access has shifted, but the way that our game is promoted is probably better than it's ever been promoted before, which is helpful for the game, the brand, and gives us that global awareness that we need to continue to boost not only ratings, but boost awareness to young kids all across the world. You look at the global impact we have on our sport, the Giannis's of the world, right? The Joker's just won MVP. I'm pretty sure he won it back to back, unless I'm mistaken. All of that is really good for the game. Luka Doncic, right? Really good for the game, because now, we're attracting, people from all walks of life, all parts of the world, and it's making our sport better. So I would say the media has had a positive impact because they're promoting our game. They're sharing stories from players. And I think that's the cool part about, the worldwide leader in sports is the storytelling aspect, but also how we're able to, relate to all different types of fans, casual and experts.
What's your feeling in terms of having reporters back in the locker room? You're the head of the PA, now you're involved in media, you're a player, obviously. What's your feeling on that in terms of relationships, in terms of telling the stories, getting to know guys and to be able to tell their stories maybe better, or maybe you find it's a nuisance? What's your take?
Yeah, it's tough balance. I think due to COVID and where we're at, it made sense to kind of, try to split us up, if you will, to keep everybody safe, to kind of keep the spread contained. And we were in a state of disarray. Like, we didn't know what was happening. We were unsure of the future in sports in general and how it would be played, how it would be covered, how it would be called. We were sitting on the bench with masks on. So there was a different stage, different time. I think the relationships are important. The only way to really kind of maintain certain relationships is to have that locker room access. So I think it is important from a journalism standpoint, storytelling standpoint. The peer-to-peer interview is just better generally. Like, Zoom is great. Like, we're thankful for the adjustments we've been able to make with it, but there's nothing like a press conference post-game, right? It's nothing like the immediate reactions that you can get live. And then, like you said, a lot of people have been involved in the game for a while. It's been a great part of basketball. I think if there's a balance that could be had with it, I think that would be better, because then there's a happy medium being met where the players are still happy, but the journalists are still getting the information they need.
Have you set up relationships with some of the beat writers?
Yeah, I mean, over the course of my career in Portland, I had obviously relationships with local beat writers, national, and moving over to New Orleans, I'm getting more familiar with the beat writers that cover there. But I just always try to be respectful. I think that's important. Like, our time is our time, right? We got a busy life, but everybody has a job to do. So I generally just try to be as respectful as possible. I remember what it was like to try to get quotes after games, covering Lehigh sports, and interviewing a coach after a tough loss, interviewing a coach after a tough win. It's all difficult, but at the end of the day, we all got deadlines, and my job is to perform at a high level. And, the journalist and beat writer's job is to tell that story.
What did you cover?
I covered women's field hockey, men's, women's lacrosse, volleyball. I did the Patriot League Tennis Championship. I did cross country. I did football. I did probably everything but men's basketball and swimming. I did women's basketball. I've done stories, feature articles, post-game, pre-game. I did the video behind the camera. I've chopped up film and edited highlights for women's lacrosse. I had to learn about a lot of these sports. I had never played them and didn't grow up around them. Like, we had hockey at my high school. We didn't have lacrosse. So I had to learn about a lot of sports, trying to follow a field hockey, ball in a storm, like with the camera, like all that is difficult. But I went through the works to really get an understanding of all phases of journalism.
What's harder, making the NBA or being a journalist? Let's face it, it's a journalist, right?
It's got to be journalist, CJ. Come on.
It's harder to make it to the NBA, but I think from a work and preparation standpoint, it's just different. Like, being a journalist is hard. It's not easy. The hours, the preparation, the getting quotes, putting stories together, deadlines, all that stuff is wild, right? Like, it's hard, but playing basketball is a different type of grind. Like, playing a sport is a different type of mental and physical exhaustion that's not for everyone.
Yeah, no, listen, it's the NBA, man.
Yeah, I know. Come on.
Hey, you're being respectful. We appreciate that, man. But any schmo like me and John can do it. So,
I mean, journalism is a learned sport, right? Like, you can learn to do it. You might not love it, but you can learn to do it. Everybody can't learn to play at the highest level.
Exactly.
CJ, you focus a lot on the positive aspects of media, but there's certainly some negative aspects out there where people criticize your play. People, especially now in your role as with the PA, people criticize you personally. How do you deal with that criticism?
You can't please everybody. I think that's what it comes down to. I have a strong faith in our Lord and Savior, and outside of Him and my family, I don't generally care what people think about me. Like, you're going to like me or you're not going to like me, but it's not going to affect my mentality. It's not going to affect my mood. It's not going to affect how I carry myself. And I think I just try to do things the right way. I try to do my roles to the best of my ability. And my game's not for everybody, right? Like, some people may not like my game, which is fine. Some people don't like tea. Some people prefer to drink water over orange juice, or orange juice over apple juice. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. It's a preference type of thing, but it's more about the content of my character. Like, as long as they respect that, like, you can be quite frank and have an opinion about my skills or my ability to be president, or the decisions that I may make as president or help make us make as a whole, which is completely fine. Like, it's a part of being in the spotlight, and I embrace that and accept that, but I don't let it affect my mood. If I paid attention to what everybody thought about me, my life would be like a roller coaster, like great days, terrible days. It's part of the process of a human being.
When you look at your goals in sports media, what do you want to, like, if you say, after you retire 5-10 years down the road, what's the goal for you?
I want to do everything to the best of my ability. I don't think I've set like individual goals. The biggest thing that I said I would do was keep my degree alive, right? When I got drafted, the reason why I picked my agency, the reason why I picked my agent, the reason why I've strategically done the things that I have up to this point at 30 was to keep my degree alive, explore journalism, really, really take a deep dive from iHeartRadio to Sirius XM radio, to doing local radio talk shows, to doing morning shows, to doing Jamming 107.5 playlists, Portland's #1 station for hip hop and throwbacks, to doing my own podcast, to now working for ESPN. Everything has been strategic to where I've carefully thought it out. I thought about what life would be like as a retired man. I just wanted to make sure that I had all my resources in order and all my experiences in order before I get to that point. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how many kids I'll have. I don't know what city I'll live in. I don't know that part of life yet, but we're getting there. And I think it's important for me to just make those experiences and decide on how I want to live later. But I just kind of live in the present while planning ahead for what may be in store.
CJ, in the weeks that you've been at ESPN, what's been the biggest surprise for you? What were you not expecting?
I think the workload, right? Like I worked in journalism in college. I've done 130 episodes of my own podcast. I've solicited guests. I've done countless amounts of interviews. I've done hits for SportsCenter. I covered the finals for ESPN in 2016. I've done the gauntlet, but these hours are different, right? Like, call time might be 8 a.m. You might do post game and it's 12:30. You might have to wait for it. You might have to redo a spot again. Like people don't understand the amount of work that goes into it, and then the preparation on the side, doing show after show after show, having to have different talking points, takeaways. It's just a lot. You have to be really cut out for this lifestyle, and I'm glad I get to enjoy it and go through it. But I think I forgot how much work it was. And
you haven't started rooting against overtime, have you? Like,
no, but I used to be able to just turn the TV off, right? When the game was out of hand. Now you have to watch it to the end. You have to be able to get points on what happened at the end. And in general, like you turn Netflix on or something, or go walk the dog. Like, oh, this game's over. I'll wait for the next game. Now you have to really watch.
Yeah, they don't teach you that at journalism school, man. Like you got that you learn only by doing, and then you get to the Bristol car wash, man, and they keep working you and working you, and then they throw a podcast in you. But we really appreciate you coming on with us. It sounds like we may be talking to you in the future, because I don't think this sounds like just one stop on a number of stops in the McCollum media rise. So we appreciate you coming on the Marchand Ourand Sports Media Podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
CJ McCollum, that was a good interview. If he had stayed at Lehigh, he would have made bucks, Andrew. That's what I took out of that one.
That's what you took out of it. Yeah, he might not have done all that journalism if he was getting paid by IHOP and the car dealerships, etc. But I was impressed, and I do think it's like in any field, right? Like I always say, people who do what we do, you should be written about at some point, because then you're going to realize how much care you should put into getting things correct. Because when you're written about and things are incorrect, you're like, what the heck? Especially, why didn't someone call me? And so I always say that it's really good to get written about, even if it's, you don't like it to be inaccurate, but you learn a lesson when you like hear or read something about you inaccurately. So I think for CJ having that experience at Lehigh, I do think that probably helps him now dealing with the media. And he does seem very savvy in terms of what he's doing. He definitely has a master plan.
All right, let's get right into our call of the week.
Call of the week.
All right, here's the scene. The Phillies are having a miserable season. They fire their manager. They're down in the 9th inning, bottom of the 9th in Philly. Bryson Stott's at the plate, 2-on. Here's Tom McCarthy on NBC Sports Philly. He's in the booth with John Crook and Mike Schmidt.
Runners go. 3-2 is hit in the air to right field. It's golfed beautifully. It is over! 3-run home run for Bryson Stott. The prayers have been answered. The Phillies have won it here in the bottom of the 9th inning. They win it 9-7.
Andrew, the thing I love most about that is not the Phillies winning, because of course I'm from DC. We hate the Phillies. It's Kruk just screaming, "Get out, get out!" That's what you want to hear from a local broadcaster.
That's funny because I actually don't like that part. He's got to pipe down. He can talk after. Don't ruin McCarthy's call. I'm a play-by-play purist. Let McCarthy have the call. What I like, and you can't hear it when you're listening to this, but the visual, that's where the producer director there, they deserve a lot of credit because there's a little kid that they're showing right before the at-bat, and then they show him, with the home run, and they incorporate it into the call. And so it really complemented what McCarthy said, and a really good hometown call from Tom McCarthy.
Well, that's another week of the Mando Sports Media podcast.
The drunken Mando podcast that John put in all kinds of drinking games. This is why when you do your ratings, hopefully you're feeling a little buzzed here because John had drinking for NFL TV, free agency. Anytime I mention New York Sports Radio.
Yeah, I didn't say anything nice about Jimmy Pitaro, so all my guys are sober.
That is true. You do love executives. All right. Well, if you want to give us a rating, that's great, especially if it's a 5 out of 5. That helps us apparently. Also, if you want to review the podcast, we appreciate that, and obviously following and listening to the end, we appreciate. So, see you next week.
Thanks for listening.